thanks to everybody for joining. And always a good topic, energy, utilities, budgeting. These are all things that people are thinking about as they're going into the new year. And really what I think the goal of this call is really to lend a lot of Joe's expertise about this topic and energy procurement, as well as the energy markets, for free and kind of as a value add to our clients and or prospective clients, to answer some of their questions as well as just provide some insight and some of his expertise on this subject and help people kind of navigate the energy markets and all the different charts and graphs and commodity pricing. And you can look at a lot of it and you can do a ton of research and it'll tell you one thing or another thing. And the easiest way to really get in-depth knowledge about it is to talk to somebody that's in the market every day. And we have somebody like that here today. If you want to just, I'll do a brief intro on SIB and kind of who we are, what we do, and how we help our clients. So we're really a conglomeration of PhDs and experts that work with our clients to help them be more profitable. And what we do has no upfront costs and really has little to no work on our clients, and especially with some of the changes in technology, with most companies using a SaaS accounts payable platform or different types of software where we're able to get read-only access or scan copies of invoices or different types of reports that are normally kind of at our clients' fingertips. That's really all the information that we need. And then from there, we kind of take it away and do all of our work behind the scenes after we speak with our clients about the best way to engage and how they want us to engage with them. And so we've acquired some companies, and some people may have been pushed to this webinar or asked to attend this webinar from some of our subsidiary companies, Vector, Shipware, Cost Control Associates, which Joe is originally from Cost Control Associates. Procure America, they specialize in working with government, healthcare, education, Getita, as well as Sage. And so one of the most important things and things that we really like to stress here is how much we can really multiply our clients' efforts, and how SIB is the multiplier effect. And this really plays out with so many people these days and so many clients of ours where they say, "Oh, I don't have the time to look at these things. Give it to SIB." And one of the biggest objections we face is sometimes, "Oh, we just don't have time to get to it. We don't have time to get to it." Well, if you don't have time to get to some of these expenses, odds are that you're almost definitely overpaying. And it takes a little bit of work on your end and a lot of work on our end. And that's kind of the best part. We're multiplying the little bit of work that you're doing. Maybe it's 30 minutes, and we're spending 30 hours on this project to make sure that gets done right. And that's the multiplier effect that SIB really has for our clients. And so working with SIB, I can talk about the ROI on some of these projects, but I mean, I estimate it to be about $10,000 an hour in pure profit to our clients. And some of the smaller clients, we may save them less, but they only spent 20 minutes getting us the information. So that's all of a sudden that the return on investment is really remarkable. So that's the multiplier effect that we can have for our clients, as well as prospective clients if they want to work with us. So. And here's just a quick overview. So we're going to give introduction and market overview provided by Joe. And then we're going to talk about, current market insights, procurement opportunities, and what's going on, what to prepare for in the new year, and what kind of history tells us, as well as some of the different insights and kind of precursors that Joe's going to talk about. And then basically proactive energy management. So, how we can help if you want to do it yourself, or what's going on in the markets, the competitive advantage that SIB provides for our clients, and different energy solutions that we offer. Then Joe's going to walk you through a quick case study involving the winter storm that was in Texas. And then we're going to finish it off with some Q&A. And then Joe, just a quick introduction, which is he's been in this industry for 6 years. He is a licensed and certified energy procurement professional. I think, Joe, you were saying that's the highest energy certification that you can possibly get.
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Tom. I always like to kind of make the joke that it's sort of the highest designation for an energy procurement nerd like me. So, you guys are in good hands. It's a licensed CEP through the AEE, the Association of Energy Engineers.
So obviously well informed and well educated on the energy subject and energy procurement. I can speak to the work that I've worked with. I don't know how many clients with Joe, and he's every single one of them loves Joe. So maybe if we work with enough, I'll find a client that doesn't like Joe and isn't happy with the work, but haven't been able to find one yet through a extensive client base. So everybody that works with Joe, or we set up a call with Joe to talk about their energy pricing and the energy markets, they're always extremely impressed with what he has to share. And my background, I've been at SIB for 14 years. I actually was the third employee at the company and seen it grow to over 500 employees. So it's been a really fun ride and really enjoyed some of the new people I'm getting to work with. And I'll let you take it away, Joe.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. And good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you
Before I
guys.
forget, if anybody has any questions, please put it in the messages or the Q&A section, and I'll be sure to get to them.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. And again, I'm Joe Scicutella, if you're curious about that last name, Director of Energy Procurement here at SIB. Just a couple highlights about the program. We manage 2.5 billion in client spend, right, with customers on flow in 22 states to really have a sort of be able to cast a wide net in the marketplace. We're licensed in every state, in the United States. And we've been able to be pretty successful over the last few years. We've been able to average our clients between 5 and 18% savings, just depending on, sort of the commodity we're working on and, the market that we're working in. So certainly proud of the success we've had with the program in the last few years. Tom did a great job laying out the agenda, and just quickly want to add to that. It's my goal to make sure that we all leave today with really an understanding of current energy market dynamics and sort of briefly how we got there. An understanding of the opportunity we see that exists for spring 25. Really, we see it as this key inflection point, this really important buying opportunity, and that's going to be really the crux of what I want to talk about today. And then sort of how long-term price risks factor in there, let's call it, for 2026 and beyond, and just how that can actually accentuate the opportunity that we see, for spring 25. And then we'll sort of transition into just talking a little bit more about, our approach to procurement and really the value we can provide as a consultant. So before we kind of get into, the meat of the presentation, I figured it'd be good to spend just a few minutes on this slide, talking about some of the basics. And I think this will help kind of frame out the discussion as we move forward. So just to be very clear, so my team can competitively source electric and natural gas supply. And as mentioned, we do that in every market across the US. So what is that, right? What's electric and gas supply? A lot of the folks attending today probably have a lot of experience looking at invoices. But if you've ever looked at that electric or gas invoice, you'd see your charges kind of split out into two sections, right? Delivery charges and supply charges. So delivery charges are really just that, right? The cost associated with your local utility servicing you as a customer and delivering, right, power to your home or business. Those costs are regulated, and right, my team's not able to impact that, so it's not part of this discussion. We're going to be talking about supply costs, right? And think about that as really the physical commodity, right? The actual energy that is generated around the country, transmitted, right, to your town or city, so that your local utility can then take that and disseminate it to you, as the end user. So that's the piece we'll be focused on. Interestingly, important to note, that piece of your bill, those supply costs, really tends to be the most expensive and most volatile line item, right, on your bill. So from that perspective, it's really important to have eyes on, to have, that line item managed closely and just make sure we're containing those costs. Just a couple key variables to understand about electric and gas supply. Electricity, mainly used for cooling, right? So obviously in the summer. So think about any time you turn your AC on, that's when the demand for electricity will be higher, and thus really the cost, right? You've probably seen your bills spike in the summertime. That's when electricity is generally in higher demand, and then conversely, gas is used for heating. So I'm up here in upstate New York. We already turned our heat on, like a month ago, and so obviously the demand for heating in our bill is a little more expensive, and so that's how gas is used. And it's important to connect this little industry secret, a little nugget for you guys. Gas is king, right? When we're talking about and understanding the trajectory of energy pricing, and that's mainly because 40% of the country's electricity is actually generated using natural gas as the input fuel. And so with that, we find about a 90% correlation between, where gas markets are moving and how electricity sort of follows, right? So you'll see on the next slide, we're going to be looking at the gas market in more detail, and that sort of paints the picture of why, right? It's really important that we study gas markets. And then just some other factors that come up that we'll discuss a lot of these today. I think it's important to point out, extreme weather, right? So think, hurricane season or some snowstorms you might see come the next few months. Storage and production, we're going to talk a little bit about that just from the supply and demand side, equilibrium, how that impacts pricing. Think geopolitical events. We'll touch on the new administration coming in and how that might impact pricing. Liquid natural gas and data centers are a bit of a risk that we see, in the next few years. We'll touch on that. And then we're even looking at, monitoring other fuels like coal and oil, how they're performing. The demand for oil can impact, for example, gas production numbers. So we're always kind of looking at that in our team. And then obviously the economy, right? That's a bit of a demand side variable that we pay attention to. So main takeaway with that section would just be there's just many variables that we're always looking at and that you really got to stay on top of, right? To make sure that, you as an end user or customer are getting the best price and terms possible. And so that's really what my team is constantly focused on. All right. So with that out of the way, let's sort of get right to the meat of the presentation here. So as we begin to discuss energy markets, I just want to point out that graph on the right-hand side. That's going to be really useful to help kind of guide the conversation and provide a bit of a visual to what we're discussing. So this is the Henry Hub. Over the last few years, it's spot prices. And the Henry Hub is essentially the main index in the United States to measure and understand gas prices. It's what we all kind of use to create the market for gas and what the cost might be throughout the country. So we're going to be looking at as we discuss this slide. So in terms of current market dynamics, I want to kind of talk about that first. You can see from 22 to 23, 24, a big change, right? Well, we had two extremely warm winters in a row. And I believe, off the top of my head, last winter was the warmest in 43 years. So this has really caused that slide in pricing that you see on that graph from 22, 23, 24. And really what that is we talked about, the demand for gas being higher in winter. Well, when there's less demand for heating, right, that means more gas in storage, right, which means the market could be oversupplied, right? And that means that we have prices generally shooting lower, right? And so specifically with storage, every year, April through October, we call that injection season, where oil and gas producers are basically pulling gas out of the earth and then storing it underground, right, to be able to make sure that when winter comes, right, we can meet the demand, right? So we have enough gas in storage to meet that heightened demand in winter. And generally speaking, we withdraw gas November through March when it's cold to meet that heating demand and service customers. So if you think about it that way, right, since it's been really warm, we've been able to build a storage surplus because we really haven't withdrawn as much gas as anticipated the last few years. So to that end, as we're talking right now, we're about 6.5% or so above the 5-year average in terms of storage underground, and with a mild winter forecast, which we'll talk about in a minute. We were oversupplied really all of 24, which has a lot to do with what you see there with price weakness in the beginning of the year. And if you think back to what we talked about in the initial slide, right, that impacts electric pricing, right? So as the cost of gas goes down, the cost to generate electricity goes down, which is, good for electric end users. So all those things are kind of, combined to create lower prices. So with that said, we're expecting a third mild winter in a row. And again, that would leave us vastly oversupplied, which we already are, right? At a time when energy demand is probably going to be low, right? So, and I mean spring 25. So we talked about winter and summer, how pricing can spike. Spring and fall are referred to as shoulder seasons, right? Where temperatures are mild and therefore the demand for energy is a little bit more flat and a little bit less, understated. And so with that, right, if we're coming out of a third mild winter and sitting there in spring where there's not really a high demand for energy, it's a recipe for a vastly oversupplied market. Right before we hopped on here, I was just talking to Tom about weather, and to be a little bit more specific, we were expecting a strong La Nina pattern, right, throughout this winter. And so what does that mean? Generally speaking, La Nina points to a weather pattern where the south tends to be warm and dry, and the north tends to be a little cooler and wet. But that can be a little different depending on the strength of La Nina. And with a strong La Nina pattern, which is what I'm anticipating, a lot of times that warm air can shoot up further north and up the East Coast and create, a warmer climate, right? So again, if that kind of materializes, then we would expect to have an oversupplied market and a really good opportunity to lock in your price. So just to kind of connect that to the chart, you can see we've sort of got that nice red circle on the piece that kind of explains that, right? So you're looking at that circled section. That green line is the Henry Hub, is the futures pricing now, right? So that's actually where pricing is headed throughout 25. And that blue line is the EIA forecast, right? So the EIA is the Energy Information Administration, which is sort of like the leading government body in the US to, understand and report on energy in this country. And as you can see, based on a lot of the things that we're talking about, there's an expected dip from where pricing is right now. And that's that buying opportunity. That's that opportunity for us to come in low, be able to capture a really major dip in pricing next year and perhaps lock in a price long term. And so it's really a key inflection point in energy. So we talked a little bit about supply, right, and storage, excuse me, and that's obviously a main factor that we've been discussing. A couple other things that could lead to that dip, right? We're actually seeing really high production right now. So we have this surplus, but we also have producers producing oil and gas at a rapid rate. Well, why is that, right? Well, first of all, you got to think about planning for the future. So we're in winter right now, it's mild. Well, we got to plan for next winter, right? You got to always make sure you're injecting enough gas underground to be able to, meet the demand for winter risk premiums. So we're trying to fill storage. We talked about liquid natural gas, which I'll get into a little bit more. That being a reason we're producing more gas. So over the last couple of years, the United States has become the leading exporter of LNG around the world. Just for a lot of reasons, but the war in Ukraine kind of expedited that. Folks in Europe losing access to Russian gas, and really, if you think about it from other countries' perspective, right? LNG from the U.S. tends to be cheaper and cleaner than other forms of energy, so that's great. And then producers in the United States are actually able to get a higher price in these foreign markets than if they were to turn their gas domestically and support domestic end users. And so from that perspective, right, producers want to keep producing to meet perceived LNG growth coming down the pike. Kind of in the same lane is, as we continue to see AI become more important in our society, you guys have probably noticed out there, attendees, probably seen news stories or maybe in your town or close to you, data centers, right, popping up to support and power these projects. Man, they draw a lot of power, right, away from local utilities and folks like us and just our home or business. And that really creates, which we'll talk about in a minute, a risk factor in the future. But it's another reason, right? We see this wave of load growth coming that we see high production right now. And then just to kind of touch a little bit on the new administration coming in, we do expect a lot of interest in reshoring U.S. manufacturing, right? Bringing jobs and manufacturing back in-house, essentially. And with that, right, that's a lot of perceived growth in manufacturing, and so producers want to produce, right? So you've got all this surplus of storage and high production. And then another factor in there is curtailed gas. We expect that to return to the marketplace first half of 2025. And what that really points to is producers have become a little bit more flexible and creative over the last several years in terms of how they respond to market conditions. And we had some really low prices, spot prices throughout 2024. We talked about being super oversupplied. Well, the response from suppliers was to take production off the market, essentially, and kind of help try to tighten that supply-demand equilibrium to lift pricing. And so we expect that gas to return to the market first half of 24, again, adding to this, flush capacity that we expect to be sitting there waiting for spring 2025. We just talked about liquid natural gas and how we kind of need to increase supply to meet that, right, to meet that challenge. Well, we've also seen some announced delays in some of those LNG projects, some new facilities being able to export more gas. There's been some announced delays to that in the first half of 25. And so what that means is, right, folks producing gas are able to then point that down to storage underground, creating, again, an oversupplied market. And at the same time, all that's happening, another thing about, the new administration is they're less likely to retire, dirtier forms of energy, what we call brown power. That would be like coal and gas plants, right? And so again, with that, we expect, a lot of capacity to be sitting there spring 25. And again, that's where you see that red circled area, that nice blue line dip there. That's all those reasons are why we want to capture that. Just to kind of accentuate that point, I think this is really important to add is not only is there that nice dip that we anticipate, but we expect a run up in pricing over the next few years for a lot of the things that I'm already talking about, right? And that's represented by, you see those dotted lines, that upper and lower bound. The easiest way to think of that is sort of like a best case and worst case scenario. So if some of these things I'm about to mention kind of go the wrong way, right? In a bullish direction, then we could see the market, kind of spike a little bit out of control, perhaps, right? And so not only do we want to capture that really nice soft spot for spring 25, but we really want to mitigate the risk, right, of the market continuing to run up on us. And for all the things we just talked about, so liquid natural gas, by all experts and what I'm seeing and reading, we expect that to just continue in that direction. More and more LNG exports. It's great for GDP and for these producers, right? So it's, they're not really incentivized to stop doing that, right? So expect that to continue, which takes capacity potentially away from domestic end users, and really see it as really massive load growth, right, for the United States. Same with data centers. As that continues to, as we continue to use more and more AI tools and integrate that into our society more and more, you're going to see more power being drawn away from end users, and again, massive demand side load growth. As we continue to reshore U.S. manufacturing, again, load growth, right? So think about the demand side. So the challenge is going to be over the next few years, making sure that we fill that with enough supply side projects and enough capacity, right, to meet that level of demand. And what the market is signaling is we're a little skeptical if we can actually do that. So we might have this really tight supply demand equilibrium, let's say 26 to end of the decade, and so that's the risk that we want to point out, that we want to be paying attention to and potentially mitigate. Really quick, sort of before I go on to the next slide. When I say locking in, right, that the spring would be a great time to lock in, what does that mean? Just want to make sure we're clear. So when we decide to lock in, this means essentially fixing your price, right? So for example, if we sign, let's say, a 12-month contract at 10 cents, just to make it easy, your price is 10 cents, right, for 12 months, regardless of market movement. So we looked at spring and summer and winter spiking, right, that kind of thing. Well, we level out your cost, right? And so conversely, if you're not tapped into competition, if you're just a utility customer, your price would change each month. right? So it'd be a variable price each month, and it would change with market movement. You'd have those spikes, seasonal spikes, right, to deal with. And some of these risk factors we're looking at, we anticipate that general upward trajectory. So the idea is to come in, lock that price in, right, hedge against future risk. And the beautiful thing there, it's a lot of good things that come with that, right? Budget certainty, right? You as a company can understand, I know what I'm going to pay, right? So it's price transparency. The risk mitigation of making sure that we hedge against, rising costs, and obviously savings, right? That 5 to 18% we talked about. So all good things in there. Great. So this next slide, I think, just does a good job of sort of summarizing current market conditions and, putting together what I would consider recommendations for the next few months. So that chart on the right-hand side is another way to look at what we're looking at, right? The Henry Hub. So this is a way that we like to sort of slice out calendar strips, and it gives you a nice visual of where the market's headed. And what this does is it paints the picture of current market conditions, which is what we refer to as a contango market structure, right? And it's just a fancy way of saying futures pricing of a commodity is said to be higher, right, or is measured to be higher than its current spot price, right? So we're at this low point, and the market essentially is signaling, we expect prices to go up, right? So what that tells me as an end user is there's all this risk out there that I want to make sure I'm aware of and hedging against. So, if I'm an attendee right now or an end user, what I'm looking at is, if I'm not hedged, let's say this winter, it's been mild. We expect we're seeing a blip of cold weather, in December so far right now. Probably want to make sure we're hedging against that and maybe lock in short term. But same with electric and gas. You want to maintain flexibility this spring, let's call it April, May, to be able to have that footing to hedge long term. Again, keeping 26 and beyond in view, and sort of planning and making sure that we have, strategy in place to again hedge against all that risk that we just talked about.
Joe, just as a question on that
Yes,
previous slide, what does if don't mind going back,
sure, absolutely.
what does MMBT, something therm, I think.
Yeah, MMBTU is just another measurement, for natural gas. It's the main measurement we use. It's like British thermal units, right?
Okay.
And so the cool thing with energy is there's all these different forms of measurement we can use. Every utility or market may have a different measurement. What my team typically does is we sort of normalize everything down to therms, right? You just mentioned therms. It seems to be what most people are comfortable talking about. But it's all sort of the same thing, just a different way to measure it, right? So it's just a
Okay.
price point that's generally used, to discuss the Henry Hub. Good question. All right, awesome. So yeah, we've talked about some energy basics, right? We talked about markets in the short term, long term, where spring kind of fits. I just want to shift gears a little now, right, and talk about our approach to procurement and sort of how we can provide value. So there's a couple of pieces to this. So I talked about averaging 5 to 18% savings. Well, the competitive RFP process in itself is like a big part of that, right? So we leverage supplier relationships, right, in the marketplace to really help our customers get the best price and terms possible. We do that using, leveraging our footprint. We talked about the 2.5 billion in client spend that we manage, right? We use that as a way to get suppliers to bid aggressively, right? So these guys understand, right? They're up against competition. They understand our footprint. So in that way, if they put their best foot forward, if they bid aggressively to win business with us, right? They know there's going to be more opportunity from the future, and that's powerful, and we use that to our advantage. But I think also when you combine a strategic approach, right, to that's where we really can get the best results, right? So a couple of things to point out. My first one's huge, and we'll in a minute here, we're going to talk about a success story that sort of connects to that. But our proactive approach to renewals is really important. So, for example, if you have a contract that you signed, it's, 12, 24 months out, a lot of consultants or folks out there, maybe you think, oh, we're okay, we'll wait till maybe 3 months out to kind of look at this thing again. Well, we routinely want to look at renewals, 12 plus months ahead. And the reason for that is, right, kind of what I just said is bringing the competitive aspect together with proper market timing, right? When to buy, right? And through the slides we just looked at, you guys can see how important that is, right? Can we capture a market dip, right? Do we have to hedge against competition or against rising prices, right? So understanding market timing and being proactive with renewals goes a long way to making sure we get you the best results. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. The other thing comes to mind is just sort of like our long-term strategic approach to procurement plan and your load profile. So starts with having access to flexible products, right? Flexible, contracts and energy products. So we talked about fixed pricing, how that can be advantageous. We have products that range all over the map, right? We can do index products. We can have a hybrid approach that can get real creative and interesting, where maybe we lock in 25 or 50% of your commodity, put a collar on it, manage that with a market watch, and kind of help watch where the raw commodity is going and make some decisions that way. So the takeaway there is just flexible flexible energy products and the ability to adapt, right? And obviously with you as the customer with your risk tolerance in mind. So that's not just the consultant, telling you what we think the product that's best for you, but it's a partnership. And how do you see risk and how do you kind of want to proceed? So that's an important piece. Another thing I like to mention is aggregation, right? So all of us kind of understand buying in bulk, right? The power of purchasing power, right? What that can mean. So, for example, if you have, let's say, I don't know, 20 locations in Ohio under like 3 separate utilities, my team maybe want to look at that as one project and put that out to bid together to see if we can use again, purchasing power to get supplier participation and get you the best price possible. And so that's a major factor. And then
So,
also, go ahead, Tom.
Joe, I was just going to say, one thing that really applies to everything that SIB does, and that you were talking about, I think it's so incredibly important, right? Is especially with a large company or even a small one, some of these things might get overlooked, and you've got so many contracts and expenses that you're looking at and reviewing and are expiring or in different points of the contract cycle. And are you coming up on your contracts, which is what you were just talking about? Like, we're way ahead of these contracts saying like, well, if we buy 6 months out, is this the right timing for this? It really applies to everything that we do. SIB and all the expenses that we look at, we're coming up on your contracts ahead of time so that there's tons of time to negotiate and get the best price, as opposed to your contracts are coming up on you and oh crap, now I'm on a floating rate and it's a terrible rate compared to what I used to have.
That's a great point, Tom. That's a great point. I appreciate that. Yeah, and so the last thing I'd say here that's a takeaway for me is again our market tools and how we utilize that. So we have access to flash reporting, benchmarking, things of this nature. And I just think it's key, right, to be able to bring proper market timing again together with the competitive process. But also we like to make sure we're putting some education into our recommendations so that you as the customer, right, it's not just here's price A, here's price B, here's savings. We want to put some context around what we're recommending, right, so that we're all on the same page and can really just make the best decision. So we take that seriously. All right. So I did mention we'd want to talk about a success story. And just for the sake of time, I'm going to just quickly touch on one of these. And I wanted to talk about the one in the middle there. So we had a superfoods plant, excuse me, come to us. I want to say middle of 2022, and they're in Texas, and they have an electric contract that was coming up March of 24, right? So a lot of room in between. So a lot of consultants are, like we've talked about, our end users may just kind of let that sit and, hey, we're okay. We're not an okay rate, just let's move on to other projects. But, using our market tools, right, and our ability to understand what we're seeing in the marketplace, we saw risk factors, right, in the next couple of years, just like what we talked about earlier in that slide. Not getting too specific. Texas relies really heavily on renewables, specifically wind and solar. And if you just think about it, right, if the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, you might be left with a bit of a generation gap that can cause, some volatility in pricing, and also battery storage to store that type of energy can be expensive. So we kind of saw that coming, and we showed the customer some of that and talked through it, and we agreed that it would be sort of wise to price early. So if you sort of fast forward, December of 22, we signed a 36-month agreement. We did that at 4.5 cents, right, for an April 24 start. I don't know if anybody out there is in Texas, or some of you guys might be familiar with pricing in Texas. I've been working we've done quite a few contracts in Texas this year. Pricing's been anywhere between 6.5 and 8.5 cents, right? So we had the foresight, right, to see that coming, and we were able to hedge against that risk. And I think it's a super important example of, again, using market insight and partnering with a knowledgeable consultant to be proactive, right? Not reactive. You want to be proactive in energy markets. You don't want to be reactive, and sort of the power that can have. So really, really proud of this one. We just love to be able to see our clients, reap the benefits of hard work and proper analysis. And so great example of being proactive. All right. Just a quick slide here to sort of connect the dots in terms of the process. We try to keep it pretty simple. A couple steps here. If you're interested in interfacing with my team, the first piece is sort of a data gathering mission. Typically, we need a sort of a special LOA to be able to communicate with utilities and suppliers, a site list, an electric and gas invoice for everything in scope, contracts if you have those, if you have current deals, just to make sure we're not overlapping on anything you might have in place. So that's pretty simple. We try to make that as hands-free, hands-off for you guys as possible. And then once we get the data, I like to be able to have a category specific kickoff call, just kind of put a face to it, give you an overview of everything, and kind of just talk about timelines and strategy and next steps, so we're kind of all on the same page. And then it's the fun stuff, right? The RFP process. So that's my team going to work. We do that, immediately after the kickoff call. And one of the cool things is it's pretty quick turnaround. So generally speaking, we can turn results around within a few weeks. And with that, we provide a really transparent, detailed savings analysis that looks at every price and term we collected, indexed against your current contract or the average market price for a client of your size and scope, and your market referred to as the price to compare, right? Give you those data points. And then some market context, again, to be able to give you more data and more bullet points to make an informed decision. And then once we kind of have a decision and we're ready to go, ready to sign, it's pretty simple. It's just an easy DocuSign. We can help you, negotiate the contract a little bit and read through that and answer questions. And then from there, we just kind of verify that everything's been changed over once we sign and you get your first invoice. And then the cycle just kind of repeats, right? My team will continue going to bat for you, looking through the rest of your portfolio. As I mentioned, being 12 months ahead of renewals and just kind of continuing to look for opportunities to save. All right. So I think at this point in time, we want to stop for some questions. Oh, you're on mute, sir.
Yeah, I started talking and then I realized I was on mute.
Every webinar that happens once,
This was my one time. And at least I didn't think I was on mute, and then I found out that I wasn't, so it's better that this way.
I love it.
And so we got one question here, and it is, how can I acquire electricity futures in electrically regulated states? My understanding is that I cannot buy electricity futures in my location. I asked him what that location was, but he hadn't had a chance to respond.
Yeah, that is correct. So, deregulation opened, in the 90s, and unfortunately it hasn't made its way to every state or market at this point. A lot of states do offer competition. If you're in an area that does not offer competition, then you can't really impact the supply side piece. CCA, my business unit, we have solutions available on the regulated side, right? So, looking through tariff options, let's say, to try to find a better regulated menu, option to like a schedule of charges, right, that might fit you better, like a time of use rate, for example, or looking at ways to keep your demand charges in check, like a demand response program, that kind of thing, that can help sort of burn the candle on the other end and keep, energy rates in check from that perspective. So I would say if you have questions like that and you're interested in learning more about that, you can get in touch with SIB or myself, and we'll put you in touch with the folks that are experts on the regulated side.
And I think the person said that they were in Indiana, which I think is deregulated for natural gas, but regulated for energy. Is that correct?
Yeah, we actually have really good connections and ability to price in under NIPSCO for natural gas.
Okay.
We've had a lot of success in that market. So if there's an appetite to have a conversation about natural gas under NIPSCO, love to have that conversation.
Perfect, perfect. And then someone else asked, how long is the typical energy contract and
Mhm.
does it change per state?
Yeah, so that could be whatever we want it to be, right? So typically what my team will price out is 12, 18, 24, 36 month contracts. And then we ask for what we would call sweet spots, right? So for example, maybe a 19-month contract holds the best price and there's a reason to so typically speaking, we'll look for rates anywhere from, a year to 3 years. We can look even further out. But a lot of times that's sort of where we sit. And just knowing my department and our history, we do average about 24 months just across hundreds of contracts, right? So I'd say, 24 months would be probably our average, but that's just based on conversation on the energy markets so as things change, our recommendations on term length would change. We're talking about spring 25 being important. I'd probably want to recommend a longer term, right, to hedge against that future risk that we see. So it's really just a conversation and trying to fit into where the cycle is.
Okay, that's great. Think, yeah, so answered that question live. And then anybody else have any other questions?
You can answer some of these on the slide too, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. How much does your service cost and how does SIB get paid?
It's actually a great question, and we didn't touch on that yet. So, in terms of how we get paid, we're different than other categories that Tom we working on you with, right? A lot of what SIB does, we share in savings, right? Well, with our program, we don't have any savings share, so whatever you save is yours. We get paid in the form of a supply adder, right? Which is a little addition to your overall cost that's baked into the analysis we show you when we do recommendations, right? So it's already included in your contract price and the price we show it with the analysis. And the cool thing there is you as the customer, you don't pay us an extra invoice, owe us something directly. We get paid in the background each month by the supplier in the form of residual commission, right? So the cool thing is we come in, we lower your bill, we put you in a great spot, and then we get paid in the background by the supplier, and kind of everyone wins. So really good win-win situation.
And what are the average savings? And how do I know I'm getting the best price?
So good question. So we did talk about average savings, 5 to 18%. And I know it's kind of a bit of a wide range, but it would depend on the commodity, electric or gas, and the market, right? Might have more success in certain markets than others, depending on different dynamics. How do I know I'm getting the best price? That's a really good question. So, what I'd say to that is, again, combining the competitive RFP process with an understanding of markets and the suppliers that we use, right? I think that's an important thing to talk about quick. We partner with about, 25 suppliers around the country. A lot of the major suppliers we've all heard of, right? All the big players. We also try to have a good mix of smaller regional suppliers. They're in like a growth pattern. And that's really because a lot of times they want to put pressure and come in aggressively to win market share. And that can help drive prices down overall for folks. So, you know, having that analysis to look at, right, and all these data points we give you with recommendations. What's the average market price for an end user like me in my area? What's my current contract price? Where do we see markets moving, in the future? And then that competitive piece, right? All of those things combined, we feel pretty confident that that's, what helps you get, again, the best price possible. So hope that helps answer that.
Perfect, perfect. And what's the advantage to fixing your price besides savings?
Yeah, I think we touched on that a little bit. So if you think about it, right, if you're not locked into a price and you're just a utility customer or you're an index customer, you're going to see your price continue to fluctuate throughout the year. You're going to have those seasonal spikes. And so what this does is it gives you budget certainty, right? Hey, I know what my price is going to be. It gives you price transparency, right? I don't have to guess or have a shock, right, to what my price is going to be. And I think that's certainly important. And then also again, mitigating the risk of the market. So maybe it's not a huge savings number, right? When we do a fixed product in what it looks like on on the onset, but then again, as if energy markets are said to be going up, like we talked about with the contango market structure, then it's again mitigating that risk and knowing as a company, I'm taking that right off the table, and I've got this nice flat price that I can count on.
Perfect, perfect. And then we have a question here from an attendee. How can you tell what you can save, or can you tell me what you can save me before I contract with SIB?
To be very specific about what we can save, we'd have to interface, right? We'd have to gather data. We'd have to go through the RFP process. And that's because every client profile is different, right? So pricing for customer A might not be the same for customer B, just depending on how you use energy, what markets you're in, how many sites there are, this type of thing. We could potentially benchmark it, right, through having discussion and just, a high level discussion of what we think the opportunity would be. We do that pretty often. But really, for us to go through the analysis, we'd have to, go through the process. And then at the point of recommendations, we'd be able to score that up, give you a value proposition, and then from there, it's your decision. So at that point, you're not locked into anything, right? We've just talked, we've done the work, we've given you that view of what the value proposition is, and then it's your decision to, sign the contract or not. So signing up with us in the beginning doesn't force you into any contracts. Again, we just be consulting, giving you recommendations and doing what we can to help put you in the best position possible.
Perfect. Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the LOE, which is really all we need, the letter of exclusivity. I mean, we can do all of our work, and then if you don't go with us, you can always give someone else an LOE. But I don't
Yeah,
know why somebody
yeah,
would do that, but that is an option.
exactly. It doesn't happen, it doesn't
Yeah,
doesn't really happen, but it's nice as a customer to know that you're not locked into anything until
yeah,
you see the results, right? And have the conversation.
very true. And then, do you have access to a wide range of suppliers, or are you limited to specific ones? Do you receive a kickback or incentives from suppliers for recommending certain contracts?
Yeah, so I kind of answered that a little bit ago in that we're really cognizant of making sure we have a really good, healthy mix of suppliers, right? Some large suppliers and some smaller regional suppliers. We're the type of consultant that wants to have maybe, anywhere between 4 and 6 per RFP. And these guys know they're up against other vendors. There's no kickbacks, there's no incentives, right? The idea for us is to create competition for your business, right? That's sort of the heart of deregulation to begin with, right? Is you as a consumer having choices, having competition that theoretically drives market pricing down. And so that's a huge piece of what we do. And we have to maintain strong relationships with suppliers. So, you know, I'll be honest with you, me as the director is sort of doing a dance all the time and making sure that, hey, I work for the customer. That's who we represent. They're our main focus, but also keeping those healthy, strong relationships and making sure that our supplier partners are looking forward to pricing with us. And so, yeah, that's another way that we try to make sure we're passing on value to the customers is having those strong relationships, good communication, but expectations that it's going to be competitive.
I think we're good. So feel free. I know everyone that attended the webinar received a couple of emails from us about reminders and things like that. So feel free to respond or reach out to any of the SIB representatives that you've worked with in the past. If we can help you out with any of your energy or energy procurement needs, or just have a conversation about, what's going on in the markets and how we can help.
Yeah, it was great speaking to everyone today, even though I can't see you. And yeah, just hope that was informative for you guys. And just looking forward to interfacing with anyone out there that's kind of interested in learning more.
Great. Thanks for your time today, Joe, and appreciate everybody being on the webinar.